I have two severely underwatered succulents here, and I'm gonna show you my process to help them get plumped back up and rehydrated. The first thing that you'll need is a container that's a little bit larger than your pot, but one that'll also go up to the rim of the pot. So in this case, I just have two different little trays from the dollar store, and I'm gonna put the pot inside the tray, and then I'm just gonna water on top of the soil or just fill up the tray. Either one works. I do like pouring water onto the top, which is a little bit different from traditional bottom watering. Most people, when they do traditional bottom watering, will just put their succulents in a pot full of water and let the capillary action bring that water into the soil and up to the plants where they need it. However, using a gritty mix, the capillary action doesn't work especially well because the soil is so gritty and there's so much space in between. So I like pouring water on top just to get everything wet, but then I am going to put water in here until it is full to the top of the container it's sitting in. And then I'm going to do the same thing with this one. This one, it's kind of hard to actually access the soil. When I water this one normally, I actually have a little squeeze bottle that I use, and I'll lift up the leaves and water underneath there, because I always like to make sure that I'm getting water all the way around on all sides of the soil. If you're not bottom watering, that's actually really important, especially with gritty mix, just to make sure that the soil is getting soaked completely through, not just in one area. An important part of bottom watering is also to make sure that the water goes up pretty high, almost to the top of the soil. So in this case, I have the water so that it's just about at the rim of this inner pot or planter. So this is completely full. I am gonna leave these two plants to sit for about 24 hours and then come back and pull them out of the water tray. Just to give you a little bit of background on these two plants, this Pearl von Nürnberg has actually been watered every 9 days. And thanks to the Succulent Tracker app, I actually know that instead of just having to try and guess. Normally, if I was trying to revive something, my first step would be to water every 3 to 4 days, just to give the plant a little bit more consistent water. I've been doing that to an extent with this, but I'm not very consistent with that, which is why I'm gonna go ahead and let these soak for so long in the water. The other plant is Acetum newspamerianum, and this one I was actually trying to keep it dehydrated because I wanted to bring out the bright orange color. When I got this, as you can see, it was pretty bright green, and this plant stresses really well. It gets a very bright orange when it doesn't get enough water and when it's getting plenty of light. So this is under my grow lights for 12 hours a day, and you can see it was last watered 17 days ago, watered on average every 12 days. And the reason why this is 12 days is just because I have been watering it a little bit more frequently, because I've noticed signs on it that it's not getting enough water. While that dehydration has brought out a little bit of orange, it actually has mostly just dehydrated the plant. So I want to get it plumped back up, and then I'll go ahead and reduce my watering frequency again. I'll probably stick to every 14 days and just see if I can maintain the orange color without getting these dried up leaves at the bottom. Now, the reason why I know that these are severely dehydrated, despite whatever watering frequency I have them on, is these lower leaves are very deflated and they have not re-inflated. They haven't plumped back up again, even with slightly more frequent watering. So what that tells me is the plant's just having a hard time soaking up enough water to keep these plump and full. If I do the taco test on this Pearl von Nürnberg, there's a little bit of resistance. It's not like these bottom ones here. The bottom ones have no resistance. They have hardly any water stored in them. But the newer growth is still pretty firm, but it does have a little bit of give to it. So I feel comfortable giving this more water. And just the fact that there's a lot of dehydrated leaves at the bottom tells me that it hasn't been absorbing enough water to keep the whole plant happy. I'm gonna go ahead and let these sit now for 24 hours and do a little time lapse to show you what happens during that time. You could see in the time lapse that these definitely perked up after sitting in water for 2 days. It's now been 11 days and the soil is completely dried out again, but check this out. The leaves are super firm. Of course, a few of these on the bottom, especially the lower ones, these are still really, really limp, But right above that, these barely fold if I do the little taco test with them. And the ones at the top are super firm. If you do this method of soaking your soil, letting it sit in water for 2 days, this is going to plump up and it's also going to grow. I accidentally left these on my recording table for those 11 days, and they don't get any direct light here. They don't get sunlight. They barely get any overhead light. So this guy grew and stretched out quite a bit. This sedum actually did really well also. I would say it recovered even better than the Echeveria did. All of these leaves are full, even down to the bottom ones, and if I do the taco test on these, there is no give whatsoever. This is 11 days after I watered, so not only did it help them plump up immediately, but these succulents are now holding on to water a lot longer, and I'll probably wait at least another week, maybe 2, before I water again. The frequency between waterings is really going to depend on where your succulent is growing. Normally, these are under a super intense grow light, and so I find in that setting, a lot of times I'll end up watering every 2 weeks, some as often as every 10 days. But when the leaves get really plump and full like this, I can definitely go a lot longer between watering. And part of that is because that deep watering not only helps the plant fill up, but it's now encouraging the plant to put off more roots so that it can be more drought tolerant in the future. Keep in mind that watering this way, by letting the soil sit in water for 2 days, is really best done with a succulent that's severely underwatered. For an overall healthy succulent that's been getting watered regularly and not showing signs of rot, but showing some early signs of dehydration, it's possible that letting it sit in water that long could cause both the roots and the succulent itself to rot. Only use this method if your succulent is severely dehydrated and hasn't been responding to normal watering. Of course, I always recommend soaking the soil completely and letting the soil dry out again before you water your succulents.